Looks like we're live streaming, ready to go. First of all, I'd like to welcome you all here to tonight's budget review. As we gather virtually on the unceded traditional territories of the Subats First Nation, I welcome you to tonight's agenda. Hopefully this evening we can move forward on some sort of consensus on the budget. Just a reminder, if you are not speaking, if you could please mute your microphone. We are live streaming and the background noise can cause some issues. Also, for anyone at home, we will have an opportunity for you to submit either questions or comments on today's process. If you do happen to be following us, you can do that either by calling 250-749-6681 at the end of tonight's agenda, or by email at general@lakecowichan.ca. And with that, I welcome all our staff and counselors here to tonight's procession. Would you like to start, Ms. Gill? Just with an overview or microphone, please.
I can start if you wish. Is there anything you want to add before I start, Joe?
Just basically, I think what we're going to do is we're going to do an overview of the entire budget, starting with the general fund and working our way through to the tax rate options at the end. And we're going to do it in a little more detailed form so you don't think we're rushing through, so that the public will have an opportunity to participate at the end of this meeting. So I think with that, I'll let the Director of Finance start the process.
Ms. Gill, please. And that's not to suggest that we haven't done work so far. We have been through the budget 3 or 4 times, but we did give staff direction to come back with some options, and that's where we are tonight. So appreciate the work that you have done on our behalf. And Ms. Gill, if you will.
Thank you. So we can start with the financials, and we'll start in the general fund with the revenues. If you want to share that so everyone can follow along, Joe. You're on mute. Okay. So we're looking at the page 1 of the financials. So this is a summary of all the revenues for the town of Lake Cowichan. It starts off with the taxation revenue at 2.3 million. And that is what is going to be, the rate's not set in stone. So once we review this budget at the end, we'll look at the rate increase. It is currently showing 3%, but that is still up for discussion. There's the grants in lieu, which are taxation from utilities. We have the penalties and interest, business license revenue, building permit revenues. And then we have the amount the CVRD contributes to the fire protection in this area. That's the 341,000. We have garbage revenues. Those bills went out late January, so you can see we've collected most of those revenues already. Lakeview Park, the budgeted revenues from the operations of the campground. There's some other revenues, some lease revenues. We have the collect revenues showing there at 120,000. So we don't anticipate a return to normal operations in that there for 2021 because of COVID. We have conditional transfers. This is where we have the grants that we've applied for, which we're hoping to get, but may not. We also have COVID restart funds in there. And we also have some gas tax funds in there for our capital projects. We have a Fire Smart Community Grant. This is the amount that was applied for in 2021. And actually, this is a number that we're still working on, so this might change, but whatever change there is to the Fire Smart Community Grant will be offset by a related expense for the same amount. So it's not going to affect the bottom line any. Next, we have the transfers from the reserve funds. The 430,000 is for the Public Works Equipment Reserve Fund. And we have 1 million coming from the Building Reserve Fund. And the bottom three numbers, the police, library, and collections for other governments, are taxation revenues that we charge on our property taxes and then pay them out to the respective authorities. So they're flow through the town of Lake Cowichan. And that accounts for the 9.7 million in revenues that we are budgeting for 2021.
Okay, if I can look to see if there's any questions on that first page before we carry on. Any questions or comments on the first page there? I do note, if I may, that business license and building and other permit fees are considerably more already than budgeted for. And that's a good sign moving forward. We always seem to have problems at times collecting some of the business licenses, but it looks like those have come in early this year. So that's nice to see.
I think
Anyone
we can
else?
clarify that, Ms. Gill.
Yes.
Yes, the business license revenues haven't been collected. Those are the billings. So they
Right.
show as revenue because they've been billed, but they could be sitting in accounts receivable as revenue that still needs to be collected. So
Right, but that's showing what would be collected.
yes, if it 100% was collected, that is
Right.
what we would get. Yes.
But under the building and other permits, those have been submitted?
Correct.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, I'll let you carry on. Sorry about that.
No, if there's no other questions on the revenues, we can go to page 2, which are the expenditures. So this is a summary of the expenditures, which will go into detail on the subsequent pages. So the main areas are general government expenses, and there's been some increases there. We've got the 15,000 for the strategic plan. We have increases to staff wages, to legal, insurance, and all of those, and we'll see that coming up. The fire department budget is there. It's fairly similar to what it was in 2020, except we were budgeting some grant revenue in that and some grant expenses in that 609,000. So if you back those off, it's fairly consistent with 2020. By law enforcement, we've increased that from prior year's budget of 61 to 64, and that's for the building inspection portion. And next we have Public Works Administration. It looks like it's going down. There's just more in administration recoveries being posted there. So we can look at that closer when we get to that page. Public Works roads, again, there's detail coming up on that following further in this process. Garbage expenses, basically tipping fees and some other increases there. Planning, health, and other. There's quite a substantial increase, but as you'll see further along, all those are grant programs that are being flowing through there. Info Center, some slightly higher costs as we'll be paying the hydro and the utility bill, which was being paid by the tenant before. And so next we have parks, a small increase in the budget there from 254,000 to 260,000. Lakeview Park, looks like a big increase, but we didn't think that there was going to be operations last year. So that one, they make a bit of money. So no concerns there. CLEC is going to be operating in a loss this year due to COVID, higher than normal. And we are using COVID funds there to offset those losses as we are allowed to do. Lakeview Park Road, that's the maintenance of the road out to Clark. The transfer to the library is the revenues that we collect for the library and then they flow out. Capital, there's 3.3 million of capital in this plan as presented, and we'll look at that in further detail later on tonight. So the rest is some debt payments, which are slightly lower than the previous year as we're paying down the debt. Transfer to reserve funds. This is a transfer to the fire equipment. There's a budget for a small amount for parks and the rest of the building reserve. And transfers to other governments. That's the other side of the revenue collections for other governments. This is the expense going out. So with that, we're showing a small deficit of $69,533 for 2021 if it was to be passed as presented. But of course, it's subject to changes, as you all know.
Great. Thank you very much. Any questions on this page? Sorry about that. Just point out that there are some expenditures in here which we have absolutely no control over. The garbage tipping fee, for instance, and the library increases, which are done by a separate board and then handed to us for payment. So there are some within this budget that we absolutely have no control over that have been already finalized at other tables and sent forward for our inclusion in our budget. So just to clarify on those. Anything else, councillors? Okay, moving on, Ms. Gill, thank you.
Okay, so if we go to page 3, the next page, this shows, we looked at general government, a total of $600,900 in the previous page. This now shows the details of how that is comprised. So as you can see, there's some increases in the budgets for office wages, for legal, a little bit in the insurance. And then there's the recoveries that we charge out to the other departments at the bottom for $277,000. So there's the wages, there's increases in those for union and staff, and insurance costs are what they are, as are legal. So there's not a lot that can be done to trim this budget. But
Okay. And
any questions on this page?
anyone there? So the strategic plan comes from mayor and council expenses or indemnities?
Correct. So for 15,000, that's included in there. Yes.
Which line? Sorry. Expenses?
Second line.
Thank you
Second
very
line.
much. Thank you. Okay. No other questions?
You see me or just hear
Oh.
me?
There we are. I couldn't see your hand. It's out of the picture, but I will recognize you now, Councillor Lamaka.
Thank you. I was wondering, with it being 2021 and we look like things aren't getting back to normal, the mayor and council expenses of the 40,000, I see that it's normal of 25,1 as in the previous year, and then the 15 for the planning, which comes to 40. But I was wondering if to offset some of that expense, would it not be lower, being that we probably won't be attending any conferences this year? Or is it just
That
best
could
to
very
leave
well
it?
be the case. I felt best to leave it in that there might be towards the end of the year. I mean, even today, they're allowing outdoor gatherings of 10 people. So there might be, if vaccinations go as planned, some opportunity for, but I'm not sure. I mean, it's an unknown for sure. And
so to follow
if
up,
that is a desire of council, that we
so if we don't do any conferences, then that money will just be there for general funds then,
Correct.
General
It'll go into
expenses.
surplus.
right? Yes. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
it'll go, yeah.
Just to clarify, both AVICC and UBCM are currently focusing on an online conference program. So that would also incur some costs within that expense line. So aside from attending in person, that is the other option as per last year for UBCM and AVICC at this time.
Yeah. The only saving would be in the travel costs.
And accommodation, we can sleep in our own bed. Okay, nothing else there? Moving on, Ms. Gill, please.
Okay, so we can move on to page 4 and look at the fire department costs, which are up from 449,700 to 476,000. So there's some vehicles that have come off warranty. So we're looking at higher costs for vehicles. There's also some increases in the fire hall, the PPE and all of that that's required by the fire department. So we've budgeted some miscellaneous operations costs, and as well as the actual call outs here in Lake Cowichan seem to be on an ever increasing other areas throughout COVID have noticed a decline in the number of calls and call outs, but that hasn't been the case here in Lake Cowichan. So that is the increase. Those are the increases in that budget. I'd be open to questions if anybody has any as we go along.
Anyone there? I think we can move on. I don't see any hands.
Okay, so bylaw enforcement and other, this is the building inspection and the bylaw enforcement. We increased it slightly as we think there's going to be more building activity in Lake Cowichan. So, and that is the only change in those budgets.
Pretty straightforward, that line.
Pretty straightforward. So we can move on if there's no
Next page.
questions.
Yeah, Ms. Gill, would there be a change with the fire smart if we get the grant?
Yes, but that'll show further along. And we can go over that a few pages later in the meeting here. Okay. So the next page is Public Works. Okay. So this budget has also been increased. As the wages, you can see, were higher in 2020. So we've increased the wages a little bit to the shop and yard. But the overall budget is showing as lower because there are more costs being charged over to both the water and sewer operations. So mostly water. Any questions on this budget?
Moving on.
Okay. The next page is the road maintenance budget. So the overall budget has been increased from 2020 to 21 by $10,000. And some of the numbers have been just reworked. So if there's any questions, we'd be happy to take those.
This does not include capital within the road network or sidewalk network yet. We will go into that later.
Correct.
Okay, no hands. Moving on.
Okay. So next is the garbage budget. This includes garbage, organics, and recycling. So garbage and organics is collected by the town. The organics is picked up by a recycling contractor. And so you can see we get some money on the utility bill that went out. We also have the Recycle BC paying us monthly amounts for the recycling. So those are the revenues, and the offsetting costs are below. Just some small increases for the tip, well, 11,000 for the tipping fees, and some small increases for the collection costs there.
Questions on this?
Thing to note is that the deficit is being financed by taxes.
That's what I was going to point out, that it does not pay for itself as other services, and that probably should be looked at, how we can either increase the diversion of organics from the waste stream at a lower tipping fee, and perhaps recover some of those costs, or look at the garbage costs as a whole, to try to make that a balanced budget.
Okay, if there's no more questions, we can go on to page 8. So the public health portion is the ambulance and the building lease. We can see the revenues there. The public health expenses related to the costs related to those buildings, we've budgeted 1,000 lower. In planning and zoning, that's where all the planning and zoning and also the contract planner costs are. No change in that budget. Other functions, this has some new items. As you can see, the budget in 2020 was 6,500. However, in 2021, it's increased to 261,660. So what's new there is the budget for community services at 100,000. We have the CRI Fire Smart project. This is the 130,000 revenue that you saw in general revenues. And these are the two numbers that might increase. We might be getting, where the fire department risk management officer is just looking at that now. We might be getting more grant money and it'll be offset by higher costs here. So it will be an in and an out. The poverty reduction strategy is also grant revenue that we're getting, and the expense is here. It will be shown here in this fund, in the other functions.
Okay,
Okay, any questions on any of those?
so just on the community services one, that it's not an ongoing process. That was a one-time grant of that $100,000, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. It's coming out of the COVID restart grant.
Yeah, just for clarification for those who may be watching at home. Okay, and off to the next.
Next, we have the information center. We discussed that earlier in the meeting. Nothing really changed too much there.
Just minus the recoveries for hydro, as you stated before, there was no tenant currently within that building. So we will be covering all those costs.
Correct.
Thank you. Anyone else? Moving on.
Okay, so next we have the parks budget. It's been increased by just under $6,000. So, and some of the budgets might be slightly changed, but not too big a change there for all the parks. Any
Okay.
questions on any of the parks or the budgets here?
I think as we go along, if we can concentrate on the bottom number instead of individual parks, and just ensure that we're staying within that focus on the budget. I think we stray sometimes on some of the coding within different parks, and we should be focused more on the bottom line and the expenditures in there.
Yes, thanks for pointing that out, Tim. Good point. If there's no questions, we can move on to page 10.
Absolutely.
Okay. So this is Lakeview Park. We're projecting a $7,200 surplus at the end. Could be higher. Most of the revenues. There seems to be quite a high demand from the number of phone calls and questions that we've been getting here at the office. But usually the revenue is dependent on the length of the season and the weather. But, we're projecting a good year, at least as good as the prior, hopefully.
Okay. No questions or comments on Lakeview Park? On the revenues? Moving on.
Okay. Next, we have the Cowichan Lake Education Center, and as mentioned earlier, this facility has been largely impacted quite a bit by COVID-19, and will continue, we think, to be projected to be affected in 2021. So the projected revenues are lower, and unfortunately, the cost to maintain, hydro heat, all those things are still there.
Questions on collect revenues? Councillor Bomaka.
If the collect is going to probably be the same as it was last year, why would we budget that 120,000 in revenue when last year I think we budgeted 15? Is it just
Good.
because we're hoping that maybe the orders might change?
No, we have had the school district there, and they do have some bookings where COVID protocols and everything's being maintained. So we are anticipating at least that 120,000, hopefully more, but at this point, it's too early to say.
Well, that's good. So even despite COVID, we still have bookings.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
A lot of them are for the international students for quarantine upon return from their country of origin or quarantine once arriving here, I believe.
Correct. Any other questions on this page?
Looks good.
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
Sure.
Absolutely, Councillor
Thank you.
Sandy. So
Just regarding food costs, we're all noticing increases, and just looking at, we budgeted 17,000 and right now we're at 5426. Do you anticipate that to stay within that 17,000? With the possibility of the numbers we have booked already?
I'm going to defer here to Dalton.
I can't, my battery just died, but basically we've calculated it, and if you take a look at the revenue we just received for that small amount for the last one, it more than covers it. You know, we're just anticipating on $120,000.
Yeah. So the manager does think that that is a reasonable budget for those costs. So we'll see as the year progresses.
All right, thank you.
okay. Anyone else? Moving on.
Okay, so
It's capital.
now we're getting into the capital budget. So these next two pages cover the 3.3 million in capital expenses that was shown on the second page when we started this meeting. So in general, we have asset appraisal. We need an appraisal of our assets for insurance purposes. Otherwise, the insurance costs are just skyrocketing. So that will help us keep the insurance costs down. Computer equipment and data processing, that should say, we have $15,000 budget. Staff is looking at a cloud-based solution whereby the taxpayers can log into a cloud-based solution to look at what their property tax and utility account balances are, which would negate the reason for them to have to come into the office. They could log on and see what they owe online and then go online to their bank account and pay it. So this is something that we're hoping to have in place for property tax time this year, but it's in the very early stages and not a lot of time left till May, but we are hoping that that will happen. Development cost charge review is something that was cut from the budget in 2020. So it's back here for 2021. And it's a review of all what we charge for DCCs. And we think that it'll be good because we can increase those fees and they're low in comparison to other. Joe, you have something to add?
Yeah, I think the numbers we budgeted may be a bit low because the last time we went out, it came in a bit high. So we're basing this on numbers on years past. So we can leave it at 20 and see what happens. But you may have to adjust it at some point. And I think it'd be better off to look at adjusting it now rather than later.
So when it went for RFP last time, do you recall how much over 20 it was?
Miss that.
When we got the responses from the DCC review last time, you recall? how much it
Around
would take that?
30,000 at the time.
Okay, thank you.
And that was a number quite a while back.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely, Councillor Sanders.
So going back a few years is where you came up with this fee or this price. It would make sense, in my opinion, if it's going back a number of years that can you go out and get a price, like a quote?
Not prior to the budget being approved, probably.
That would, to me, I would like to see that. And then we'd at least have a ballpark.
We could do that.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll just keep that in the back of our minds that may be increasing depending on what comes in on those bids.
Okay, any other questions before I begin again? Okay, so we have a budget of 100,000 for office equipment, and that'll be spent once the town hall renovations take place. You can see that we've got 1.6 million for town hall renovations just below. We also have 20,000 for the bell tower. This is started in 2020, so we're hoping to finish those fairly quickly here. And then the Mildred Child, once this building is done, will have to be demolished. So upgrades to that area and the demolish and to demo the building is $60,000. The fire department, as you know, has last year in 2020 started the construction of their display building. And you can see what their costs were there in 2020 and what they've spent in 2021 so far. So this this budget, though, there is donations that'll bring that down hopefully to the 20,000. So even though it looks like in 2021 we've already spent that 20, so again we'll wait and see, I guess, how those numbers fall. The Cowichan.
Anything on that first, Joseph?
Yeah, and on that point, we're just talking to BC Transit, and they might kick in some money for that building. So at this stage of the game, I heard a number, but I think I will leave till we get the contract from them before I can confirm the numbers.
Okay, perfect. And just to clarify on the town hall renovations, that 1.6 is not a requisition amount. We're looking for grants, and within the municipal building reserve are the expenditures from that. So 1.6 million will not be a requisition in taxation. Okay,
That's correct. Yeah.
just wanted to clarify that. People would see that and go, oh my goodness. Moving on.
Yes. So the Cowichan Lake Education Center is next. They're looking at rebudgeting some capital expenses from the previous year. They're looking at some carpet and flooring, exterior paint that was from last year, a hot water on demand out there, as well as one of the bigger roofs need replacing. So that'll be $40,000. And they're finishing off their water system, which was started last year, and that's another budget of $5,000 for the total $58,000 at the education center.
Anything on that? If I can, through you to the collect manager, the remainder of the water system is for what project? What part
The
of
well
that
system.
water system?
It's mainly to finish off the electrical system to make sure that it's all according to code.
Okay, perfect. Just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
So the next budget is the fire department. They're looking at some heat pump generator replacement for 15, some forestry hose and gear for 10,000, a new tank for fire department number 16 truck that they have for 5,000, some fire hall repairs for 16,000. The training ground facilities, those are the SCBA packs for 60,000. There's some fencing up at Meads Creek that needs to be done for 20,000. Tools and equipment of 3 and some hoses and valving for 8,000 for a total budget of 137,000. And this was the budget that was forwarded to the CVRD in September when they start their budget process.
Okay, anything on the fire department from my fellow councilors? No. Okay, moving on.
Okay. Next, we have the Public Works budget. The equipment purchases that we talked about earlier coming from the reserve fund were 430,000. So there's a Bobcat in there, some a couple of pickup trucks for the 70 and some other equipment that they're looking at. The active transportation plan is underway. That's covered $25,000 by a grant program, and our cost is 50. The annual paving program, there's $200,000 budget there for that. Chip sealing Lake Park Road, which is budgeted again from 2020. Public Works office and yard, 20,000. They're looking at a roof at that location. Sidewalks for 60,000. There's a tools budget, the stormwater planning study, and there's a $10,000 grant to offset that 15,000. Storm upgrades at Cottonwood, 35,000. And we're looking at 2 transit shelters, the cost being 25,000.
Okay, anything on that page? Fellow
I have a
councilors? Yes, Councilor Sandy.
Just regarding the annual paving, is if we wait a number of months before once we pass this and we start this, like, are costs going up with the cost of paving? And if we delay into the summer paving projects, like, are we going to get less road done for what we've got in the budget? And should this be a priority for Public Works to get kind of the roads they're thinking, get it on the books and get it booked with whatever company they hire?
That's a good question. I'm going to defer that one to the Public Works Superintendent. Here.
Can you hear me? Yeah, so can you hear me? Yeah, we're getting some echoing here. Just hang on one second.
Joe, if you can just mute, I think it's coming through yours as well.
Is that better now?
Yeah, let's try that.
Okay. So prices are always, it seems like they're always increasing. It's a hard one to control, especially anything with petroleum base. It's I just got a call today where all sorts of the PVC pipes going to have a huge increase. So that one's a tough one to control. To answer your question, we're still working on which roads we're going to do. We had some stuff come up just very recently where we may have to change what roads we decide to pave this year. So it's just gonna, until we figure all that out, we're not gonna be able to decide what we're doing yet. So it'll be later in the summer.
Okay, later in the follow-up, Councilor Sandy?
No, thank you very much.
Okay, and I'm sure that moving forward prior to the paving program, that will come back to council just for consideration and prioritization, or are we leaving that in the hands of staff? I believe we did review it yet last year, and I was hoping that we could do that again, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be probably the same list that you guys reviewed last year, but yeah, once we've come to that point, I'm sure we can review it with Mayor and Council.
Excellent, appreciate that. Anything else? Joseph, please.
Yes, I want to speak to the sidewalk issue. I know that council's made the sidewalk by the lodge a priority. And just so you would be taking some money out of that. Just for council's information, superintendent has entered into an agreement with the owners. So there will be a partnership on this issue. So they will be paying 1/3 of the cost for that sidewalk.
great. I'd like to see that finished. I think that will clean up that entrance into town. That's just my personal opinion. Okay, any other questions on the Public Works one? Thank you very much, Superintendent Sandu. Moving on.
Okay, next we have the Lakeview Park budget. There's a golf cart purchase that didn't happen last year. We've rebudgeted, resurfacing some of the campsites with gravel and sand and some floating walkway repairs. So the total budget there is $25,000. Any questions on that budget?
It's a pretty basic, clean one.
Mhm.
Okay, Parks.
Parks, we've applied for a grant for the Centennial Park upgrades. So that was in the page 1 conditional funding. Footbridge improvements, there's some repair that needs to be done there just to make it safe and walkable. Kasapi Park upgrades is 30,000. Marina Dock repairs 5,000. Satnam Park 3,500. That's repainting the box there. Stone Park 45,000. That's the fencing.
Fencing and the blue box.
Yeah, fencing and the, yeah. Next, we have the Riverside Park improvements. So this might go in conjunction with their grant program, or if that grant program doesn't come through for the Kinsman, then this could be used for the washroom upgrades. Rivers Edge Memorial Garden, there's some finishing left from the last year's capital project. That's budgeted at 20,000. At Saywell Park, there's some roofing and also some separation of hydro that needs to be done there, and that's budgeted for 24,000. So the total budget in the parks there is $442,500.
Capital. So if we look at the Centennial Park upgrades, if I may, and we have applied for a grant for that, phase 2 and 3, I believe. Would the 250 be the town's contribution in that project?
No, the 250 is the town, what the town would spend. The contribution would be that less 207,000 roughly. So our contribution net would be about $44,000.
Great, thank you. Anyone else on the Parks capital budget? Seeing no one, I think we can move on. Thanks.
I think it's just a bit of clarity on the Centennial Park upgrades. It's a 2-year project, if I'm not mistaken. So we're going to do one phase this year and the next phase next year. Correct? Nobody heard me, I guess.
Yeah, no, I believe that was what we discussed on the application, was 2-year project.
Okay.
So just for clarification. Does that finish page 13?
Yes.
Excellent. So if we can stop sharing that one for now.
Yes, next we can go and look at the sewer fund. So the general fund is a fund by itself, and then we have the sewer fund and the water fund. There's 3 funds. Okay, so there's the revenues showing for the sewer fund for 2021. We have applied, or we have billed, as I said before, for the water, sewer, and garbage, and you can see the revenues there at 513,755. The next big item on there is the sewer facilities grant that we've made application for. It was applied for last year as well, so I'm not sure what the status of that is. And then we have the parcel tax of 253,000 for total revenues of 2.9, almost $3 million there. The expenditures in the sewer fund haven't changed. The budget hasn't changed that much, except for the discounts are higher. More people have been paying their utility bills by the February or March 1st deadline this year. So that budget's been increased, as well as the chlorination budget. Other than that, the budgets remained the same from 2020. And there's 3.5 million budgeted in capital, which we can look at. on the next page.
Nothing from fellow councillors on that, I'm sure.
Yes,
We can move to the capital portion of that.
sure. So the 2.2 million grant revenue that we said we'd applied for relates to the sewer treatment plant there of 3 million. So the town would be covering the difference. We also have some lift station upgrades. We're looking at some Greendale Road sewer line engineering, some I&I work that needs to be done. And then there's work at the sewer lagoon as well as connecting the Riverside Forest Main for $50,000. That makes 3.5 million capital in this fund. But the 3 million won't happen if we don't get the $2.2 million grant that we've applied for. Any questions on that budget?
I don't have Mayor Day. I have to scroll down and see you. There you are, Mayor Day.
Thank you very much. I'll speak up next time. So just slightly confused in my head when the expenditures show a deficit of 979,300,000 if all goes well in the world of grant and all that. Just help me figure out how that deficit gets recovered.
We are taking it from the surplus in the
Okay.
sewer fund. Yes.
Okay.
So if this grant program does come through, and it'll be a 2-year project, 2021 and 2022, we will have wiped out most of the sewer surplus.
Okay,
But-
which answers my next question as well. So thank you. But that'll only happen if we're successful with the grant. Is that or getting grants
Yes.
and having to put in our portion? Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you so
otherwise,
much.
yeah.
Any further questions on capital and sewer? I'm glad to see that there is some expenditures, not only for just investigation of I&I, but looks like for mitigation as well. So that may help in the long term as well.
Okay, so the last budget is the water fund. We can go to that next. Okay, so the revenues in the water fund, you can see there, $629,000 budget. We've already sent out the water billings as stated, so most of that has been collected. The parcel taxes are $345,400. So that'll bring the revenues in this fund to $985,000. The expenses in this fund have been varied considerably. There has been some substantial increases in the water treatment plant. So we've increased that budget from 200 to 260. Overall, the budget from 2020 to 2021 is up by about $75,000 just in operations. And most of that's related to either COVID or the water treatment plant, and also the quite substantial hydro costs in that facility as well. So we are projecting a loss of $307,000 in this fund with $400,000 in capital, which we can look at on the next page. But I'd be happy to take questions first if there's any.
In for hands. Seeing none, we'll move to the capital portion of that.
So the superintendent is looking at replacing fire hydrants and some water main upgrades.
Okay, any questions on those capital ones? How much is a fire hydrant nowadays?
Just to purchase a fire hydrant is about $3,800. And then all the valving and piping, whatever that's required on top of that.
Installation, labor, et cetera, et cetera. Perfect, thank you very much.
And I also think we have a River Road hydrant that has to be installed. So there could be a additional cost of that.
Yeah, that's going to be an expensive one.
Okay. Nothing else, Sarah? Don't see any hands. Scroll down.
And with this capital,
Yeah, so that is all three funds, operations and capital costs for 2021.
And again, Ms. Gill, I want to thank you for all the hard work in putting this together and talking us through this process and helping us understand some of the budgeting process and expenditures, et cetera. We certainly do appreciate all the hard work that you do.
You're very welcome.
So if we can go to the 5-year financial plan, is that next, or what is your
that is
wish?
next.
Okay, let's go into the 5-year financial. And again, taking into consideration that the only one that will be set in stone after it is approved is 2021.
Right.
Those moving forward are projections.
So as we first started talking about at the beginning of the meeting, the total revenues were the 9.8 million. So you can see on the 5-year financial plan, the revenues listed sort of in the same format, coming to the same 9.853 million dollars, and then the related expenses and the transfer from surplus showing there at 69,533. So basically, this is a one-page summary of the details that we just went through. And then we've budgeted that out to 2025. So capital, we've looked at the needs, and that shows there this year 3.3, 1.594 in 2022, and then you can see 23. What's interesting to note, we will be paying off the debt for the fire trucks and the fire hall by 2024. And what we're hoping is that we'll be increasing the transfers to the fire department equipment reserves. So that we're planning to take from 87,000 to 160,000 in 2025. So when these large pieces of equipment come up for purchase, that the town will be in the position of paying for most of, if not all of them, upfront. Is there anything else that council would like to?
I think Joseph had a point.
Yeah, I just want council to look at the taxes collected from the municipal portion of your tax bill. If you look at it, our share of the total tax bill is about 50%. And the rest of them is the other 50% comes from other governments. So if you look at the transfers to the to collections for other governments, the police tax levy and the library levy, they come up to more than 50%. So that should give you a sense of what a tax bill, when most people look at the tax bill, they think it's the entire bill comes from the town. That's not the case.
No, good point. Okay, anything further on this one? I'm going to scroll down and look for Councillor Austin. Don't see your hand up, so I'll scroll back.
So when we pass the 5-year financial plan, the 2021 is set in stone. And then next year we will do another 5-year plan, and 2022 will be set in stone with the estimate of the following 4 years. And that's typically how it's done.
And I think moving forward, once the asset management plan is in place, that will dictate how we move forward on some of our budgeting processes in the 5-year plan, taking into consideration the life cycle of some of the infrastructure that we have, and ensuring that we can still apply for and receive grants through that asset management plan that we have in place. So that's very important moving forward for all levels of government to look at senior levels of government funding some of these programs. We've been told that without the asset management plan in place, that perhaps we will not be considered for some of those grants.
Very true, yes.
So a very important piece of budgetary process moving forward is the asset management. We're seeing that. So anything else on the 5-year plan?
So this is a 5-year plan for general. We can look at water and sewer on the next page next. should have been the second page of that same document. Yes.
There it is.
There it is. So we have the sewer up top, and you can see the total revenues of 3.968 there. And then the capital of 3.5 that we just went over, as well as administration, treatment, and collection. If, as we discussed earlier, the sewer treatment plant is constructed, you can see how large the capital costs are going to be in 2022 at 5.8 plus the 3.5 this year. And you can see the grant revenues of 5.3 coming in towards that project, and the transfers from surplus to cover the deficits in those 2 years of 978,000 and 1.9. And that pretty much does wipe out most of the surplus in these in this fund. It is good, though, that the town doesn't have to borrow to complete the project, so that's a very good thing. But it does wipe out the surplus, and we'll have to look at. It's in very good shape right now, but then we'll have to look at what the operating costs are and how much they will increase. We're looking at 307 this year, 310,000 in 2022 for treatment and collection. We've bumped that up to 400,000 in 2023, and hopefully that number is close, but we'll know more closer to. And it's going to be a big project.
Certainly is, but well worth it if we do complete
And the
it.
other, yeah, sorry, go ahead. There's one more thing that I'd like to mention in the sewer fund. If we are looking at doing the Greendale Road sewer line with the recovery from the users, the planning for that is in the current year capital budget of 100,000. And you can see the rest of that is in 2022 with debt, Greendale Road sewer line, borrowing from debt of 1.2 million. And then you can see the repayment of that debt coming through in 2023, 24, and 25, where the recovery of the debt would be the taxes collected from the users of that sewer line, and then repaying that debt off. And right now we've used a 25-year repayment term. So that is in the
five-year
plan
plan
as well. Mhm.
Any questions on that? Oh, looking good. Moving on.
Okay, so finally we have the water fund, and you can see the revenues there, 1.293, and the expenses. That does include a transfer from surplus of 306,500 and another 267,900 in 2022. But we've also increased the parcel tax from 200. That these estimates show an increase from 200 to 300 in 2022, and still having a deficit of 267,900. But it's either an increase or a cut in capital borrowing. So there is no way around it. There is no surplus left pretty much after 2022, 2023. It's been used up.
Okay, anything on this, ladies and gentlemen? I don't see any questions. So again, the 5-year plan will come forward after completion of the 2021 budget for endorsement of the 5-year plan with the budget of 2021. Okay, moving on. I think we have another piece within that, Ms. Gill.
We do.
Property assessments, etc.
Yes. So I thought it might be interesting to look at property tax assessments and how they're comprised of. So it's interesting to see that 94.78% of our assessments in Lake Cowichan come from residential. The other component is 4.93 come from the commercial or business class 6. The rest are fairly small, as you can see there. So, and then when you look at taxes from the different classes of taxation there for residential utilities, light industry, business, you can see that even though residential is 94% of the assessments, they make up 86.5% of the taxation revenue. The business or the commercial, which is 4.93% of the assessments, account for 11% of the taxation revenue. We do have a very heavy reliance in Lake Cowichan on residential class 1 taxation.
And that's given, especially on the graph or the top tax assessment, with 0.11% of heavy industry, for instance. We're always hearing that we have to try to entice businesses and interests within our municipality, and without the industrial land portion of that, it's pretty hard to do without expanding that industrial base.
So I think that was, I just wanted to sort of bring that for information forward. Yes.
Yes, Mayor Day.
Thank you very much. And I just love this chart, not only for us, but especially the public. And tagging on to Councilor McGonigal's comments about not enough industrial or within the town boundary, but I do note that there's a fair amount of C1 property that is either unoccupied or underutilized. So it'd be really great if in the future we've seen some development in those areas as well. And we are seeing a bit, not quite as much as residential, but I believe when the residential gets up and running, that those C1 properties will start to fill up as well. And that'll help out easing the burden on residential taxpayers, I hope. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. The one thing that we do have, as opposed to our surrounding electoral areas, is a lack of managed forests, very small percentage. You'll see in the surrounding areas, the assessment of managed forests has gone down considerably in the past BC assessment. So that has shifted the taxation from that base to residential within those areas. So we're seeing an impact within the increase residentially from the managed forest reduction onto the increase in the residential. So that is one thing we have for us. And I think we have tax rate options as the next one, do we not? So move to that if we could.
So at the last meeting, council direction was to come back with what different tax increases and how that would affect a typical home in Lake Cowichan. So I went and looked on the BCA website, and they said that in 2020, a typical home in Lake Cowichan was assessed at $340,000, and that in 2021, generally speaking, homes in Lake Cowichan, single-family homes in Lake Cowichan increased by 8% to $368,000. So in 2020, a home that was assessed at $340,000, and we're talking about the municipal taxes only, not the taxes paid to other jurisdictions and not the parcel taxes, just what Lake Cowichan is collecting. And the mill rate for single-family or for class 1 property was 3.37846 last year. So that home would have paid $1,149 to the town of Lake Cowichan. For 2021, with a 2% or a 3% increase, the tax on that same home would be $1,181 at 2%. At 3% would be $1,197. The difference being $16 for the 1%. So what is a typical concern for the public? They'll say, "Oh, my assessment's gone sky high, and my taxes are going to increase substantially." So generally, it's good for the public to know that when everybody's assessments go up, usually the mill rates or the rates that used to calculate the taxes go down. And that's what you can see. They were 3.378%, 3.37846 in 2020. And at 2%, they'd be 3.20895. At 3%, they'd be 3.25. So the mill rates go down when the assessments go up. And usually the opposite occurs when everybody's assessments go down and you want to collect a 2 or 3% increase, the mill rates will go up.
Great explanation. Any questions on that portion of it? I think when we look at, if I may, if we look at the taxation base, for instance, on the 2020 assessment of $1,149, taking into consideration that, again, you said that was just for the municipal taxation. You add on top of that the water parcel tax, the sewer parcel tax, and the utilities charges, then you have your full tax bill. And outside of the CBRD portion as well. So this is just one component of the total taxation within a home within the municipal boundaries. And I think that's important to note as well. That aside from taxation, there are other expenditures that are on the household outside of the tax base. I just wanted to make that comment. Anyone else? So I think what we're looking for now is perhaps some direction on where we would like to go on the 2021 budget. At what rate or percentage increase that we are comfortable with putting forward and discussing. So if there's anyone who is willing to put forward, Mayor Day, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Mr. Fernandez must be off the screen because he had his hand up there, so I'm not sure if his comments were going to.
Yeah, I did on a different issue altogether. And the issue is when we talk about an average 8% increase, that's not how everybody's going to be affected. Some people might see a greater than 8% and others might see less. So the tax rate would affect different homes differently.
No, perfect. I've lost you in my grid view as I scroll down, so my apologies.
That's
We're all
okay.
looking out for each other here.
If we can stop sharing the screen, then everyone will come up. I think we're done with
We done?
We're done with the sharing of that. We're going to move on with some taxation discussion on what increase we're.
Up share?
Please. And once you're doing that, now everybody's in view. Perfect. And I'll let you carry on, Mayor Day. Thanks for that, Joseph.
Okay, well, you know what? Just thank you very much for staff for presenting this budget very comprehensively. I don't know if it's much different than what you did last year, but after a 2-year hiatus, coming back to this process as you've laid it out here is what I just got to say. It's awesome, and it's seems like it's done at a pace where it gives us all a chance to give it some good thoughts. So I think the comment I'd like to make too tonight is that we could send staff away with an idea of what we would be comfortable with as an increase, and that would give us some more time to have sober second thoughts. And that's what I like about the pace of local government. Everybody thinks it's too slow, but I think it's for very good reason. So we can really give a lot of thought to this especially this very important issue. So that's my comments there. So just thank you to staff, and I'm looking forward to hearing from council on their thoughts on what the increase may or may not be.
Great, thank you very much. Looking for further comment. Councilor Vomaka.
Well, my thoughts are still the same as they were last year, that sooner or later you have to pay the piper. So if we keep decreasing it year after year, sooner or later, we're going to have to pay catch up. And I think when you look at it, it says roughly $16. But what was really interesting was when Ms. Gill was saying that the penalties weren't as much because everybody was paying their sewer and water and utility bills on time or when they were due. And I thought, well, that's interesting. So to me, that means that people have either made plans to have the money already put aside and they're budgeting for those bills, or they have the money to do that. And so, we have to give people that option, I guess, to pay that tax when it's due. But that's my only concern, is sooner or later you have to either have a huge increase or stay with small ones.
Great.
Thank
Those are our
you.
two options, reducing services or increasing taxation. That is
That's
our
right.
only revenue currently afforded to us, user fees and property taxes currently. So until that changes, I think I had Councillor Sandu, then I'll go to Councillor Austin.
Thank you. I know, we say businesses are doing well and, people are paying their water tax early to basically save the money. But in our community, there are many families that there's only one person working right now. And that's been more or less since COVID started a year ago today, that it was officially here. And I just look at it for this year that to the difference of, around $16 to go from 3% to 2%, I would in good conscience like to offer that this year due to COVID, due to financial restraints that every household has. And they may not be in our own inner circle or bubble, but they're out there. And the little money that I think we'd need to know what the actual bottom dollar would be going from 3% to 2%. Would help, but I'm in support of the 2% increase for 2021.
Thank you very much. Going to Councillor Austin next.
Thank you. I'm kind of wavering between the 2 and the 3. I do think you will have to pay the piper, and we certainly don't want a 7, 8, or 9% increase down the road. People will not be happy with that. $16 really isn't very much. I know people are hurting. I know some of them that are. What a lot of people, and I've suggested this to a few people that I know, why they're paying some of their things on time, and how I do it is a monthly payment online to my water, sewer, and taxes, so that you kind of forgotten you've actually paid it. You don't get a big bill in June or whenever. So I'm kind of wavering between the 2. I guess we'll have to see what the consensus is between the 2 and the 3. Again, it's not a lot of money, but I just think you will have to pay the piper down the road. We know that it has come to other communities that had no tax increase for several years, and their whole place was falling apart. So people want the infrastructure, they want the sidewalks, the roads, they want the repairs, they want it. And somehow we have to pay for it. So I'll see what the consensus is between the whole council.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm going to pipe in now. I think, and you've heard me say this before, if there was any year that we should be trying to mitigate whatever tax increase we can, this most certainly is the year, given the conditions that have transpired in the last 12 months. I haven't worked for 12 months, so I am down to a single income. I'm sure I'm not the only person in the community that is in the same situation. We had businesses struggling for the first quarter of last year with a complete shutdown, and they're trying to catch up now. I know they did have a great summer, but who's to say what's going to happen this year? It's interesting that we're in a position that we can consider utilizing surplus to mitigate a tax increase. Without good fiscal management in the past, we would not be here. We've increased parcel taxes this year on sewer, so that is a taxation increase with a 3% increase, and whether it's $16 or $32, it is still an incremental increase. Taking into consideration utilities and the water and sewer parcel tax, I think this would be the year to limit the increase to as low as we're comfortable with. And there's my comment. I don't have a resolution on the table. for consideration moving forward. So I'll be looking for someone to make that. Mayor Day, please.
Just one comment and a question to the CEO, a comment, and then I would be comfortable making a resolution unless somebody else puts their hand up. So if I may, to this, Mr. Fernandez, 1% tax increase, because Councillor Sandu reference to that, accounts to how many dollars? Or decrease? You need to unmute, sir.
Give me a minute to give you that.
And I think while we're waiting for that, people focus entirely on the 1% increase, and I think, or 2% or 3% or 9%. What you have to look at is what the impact is on the average household on that percentage increase. If it's $340,000, as we were indicated by Ms. Gill's presentation, that increase in dollar amount is what is most important. Thanks, Joseph.
Each percentage works out to 22,000.
22,000. So follow up on that, if I may. So 1% is 22,000, and it shows in our report that was provided by the financial paper there that would be a $16 effect average.
$16 to the average home.
Okay,
You know,
so
if
that $22,000 increase or decrease equates to $16 per home in this taxation year.
Not exactly. That's based on that house that's assessed at that
Right.
amount.
Right. Okay. So yeah, we're working with averages, and I think that's probably the best we can do as we're considering this. So, so just to clarify on those numbers, so I don't have a problem moving to 2%, but I'd like us to have a little bit of a conversation or a roundtable, whether before or after the motion, that do we need to take money out of surplus? Because that's the place where we're going to have to pay the piper big time in the future. And we've heard several times during the presentation that if we do this, it's going to wipe out surpluses or come very close to it. So that's a warning sign for me. And if we take a $69,000 out of there to subsidize rather than a tax increase, that worries me. So I'd like to put this question out to staff. Is there a way we could do without a truck for a couple of years and just put new tires or a tune-up or some parts on it instead of purchasing one or two more pickup trucks, or take some out of roadways? I know that's like robbing from a deficit as well by not doing projects, but having to pay it next year. But we're sitting here talking about holding back on a 1% this year, and probably knowing that if things change and get better, we're probably going to go back to 3, and hopefully not have to go to 4 or 5. But so I just like to put those thoughts out there, and then, like I said, I'd be happy to make a motion if nobody else does.
Joseph with a response.
Yeah, I think it would be better to look at it to a cut that amounts to 22,000, as Mayor Day has alluded to. We could probably be looking at that rather than taking money out of the surplus funds. That way we'll be showing a bit of restraint on our part.
Follow up before I go to Councillor Sandu, Mayor Day?
Yeah, thank you very much for letting me get back in. So what about the $69,000 that is planned to be transferred from surpluses?
That will stay. That will stay if you cut something by $22,000. You still have to take out. Yeah.
So I just wanted to chime in one more time that taking $69,000 out of the surplus is also not sitting well with me. I'm okay with the 2% increase, but
Let's just make sure that we're talking about surplus and not reserves. When we were talking about sewer reserves, we're called depleting those reserves. And those are restricted reserves that we cannot utilize for anything but that specific fund, water fund, sewer fund. So when we're talking about general surplus, if there is an allocation within that, then that can be utilized to mitigate tax increases, we are not touching those unrestricted reserves, just to clarify.
Yeah, sorry for the confusion. That's what I meant to say. Thank you.
All good. I have Councillor Sandu, then Councillor Mack.
Just two things. So surplus funds is money that isn't spent the previous year that goes into like our parks budget. Like if we underspend in our parks budget, that money then goes to surplus. So what we're saying is every 1% we take off of an increase, it's costing about $22,000. So the last few years, looking at our parks budgets where we've under spent, I'm not worried for this minimal amount of money for the 2021 budget that we go to 2%. I honestly believe that we will cover that, but I don't want to see anything cut. I think the funds will end up back there. It's not a large amount of money. If it was $100,000, I wouldn't be saying this right now. But I really feel with about $22,000, we will be able to offset that back into the surplus for next year. So if Mayor Day wants to make the motion, I'll second.
I still have a speakers list, so I'll go to Councillor Valmaca first, and then I'll.
I know we
Gauge the
talked
floor.
2% and we talked 3%. Why are we not talking 2.5% as another option?
Any numbers on the table, whatever you
That's-
want to put forward. I think we're just trying to get a consensus on where everyone is comfortable, but there is no resolution on what the rate should be for 2021 yet. And Mayor Day.
Thank you. So I would be happy to make the resolution that we ask staff to present the final version of this budget for presentation and to go to first, second, and third reading at an increase of 2%. And I would stop there with the wording and leave it up to staff how they manage to accommodate that with their expert opinions in the finances.
So a 2% increase for 2021
Correct. Thank you.
and seconded by Councillor Sandu. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Valmaca is opposed. Would you like that recorded? I think we will anyways, because we're recording it. Joseph, please.
Yeah, it's just that this will come to another meeting where you can then formally adopt it. The next finance probably. 2%.
Okay, were we not going to put this forward to council?
Well, council would be, you can do it to council, sure.
If we want to finalize.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
So if we're comfortable moving this, and at that time, we can have further discussion and defer if needed.
Okay.
Because we still do have time in the budgetary process, I think, and this will show the impact of each household, et cetera. So we're all comfortable with that. Again, thank you very much for some great discussion. We'll take a little bit of a break here. And the telephone number is 250-749-6681 or by email general@lakecowichan.ca. We'll come back at 7 o'clock and see if there's any input from tonight's meeting. So a 5-minute break, ladies and gentlemen. I could just ask if you were here to put your video back up so I know everyone's back. Perfect. 7
Ready.
o'clock. So looking if there is any input, Joseph?
No emails, no telephone calls.
That's interesting. But I'm sure it'll be viewed later and there may be some questions coming. If you do have any questions or comments after you do view this, please general@lakecowichan.ca and we will try to accommodate those answers as expeditiously as we can. So seeing nothing else, I believe that is it. I'm getting hangry.
We don't like it when you get like that.
No, I know. Neither is my wife. So we're looking for, first of all, perhaps a public process on the budget, I believe, was one of the indications that we would be looking for. Public input on the budget process. I believe Mayor Day had brought that forward as a possible suggestion. If you'd like to elaborate, Mayor Day, before we leave.
Yes, thank you. It just crossed my mind last night as I thought it through that we're doing this so organized, and I think we've given more opportunities for the public to be involved up to this stage anyways, but I just wanted to put it out there that I thought it would be a nice gesture, I guess, to the public to sort of advertise it as a public input to the budget. It could be done half hour before the council meeting at the end of the month if we're all in, if it's moved ahead to the point where it's gone to first, second, and third reading, or just before that. So if it's all looking good and we could do that, I'm just wondering if councillors would like to do that. It could be done by phone in, say start at 5:30 before regular council and go to regular council at 6. Just give the public one last time to chime in. So just thought I'd put it out there, and they could do it by phone during that half hour so that, it's quicker and easier for the public to get access. So those are my thoughts, and I shared them with the CEO this morning, and he didn't agree or disagree, but he thought it might be especially it would be doable by staff.
Okay, just on the process, I think we may have missed a step by not including the public process prior to us finalizing the budget, but that could be mitigated next year in that budget process leading up to finalization. I know that there was a public input on CBRD budgets within the different areas prior to approval, but subsequently, I think public input prior to us finalizing the budget would be appropriate. Councillor Sandy.
Could we put like all these documents on the website and then the link on our Facebook page to the website, so that if people want to review all the information that, is shared on the screen, they've got it. Is that appropriate, or can you put that on there, or?
It's on the website now.
Yep.
Is it?
Yeah, it's there. People
Okay.
can follow along and
So could we maybe then, like, I like Mayor Day's idea, but people have had opportunities to date to be part of this. But I'm just wondering if maybe they just didn't realize, because it's a special meeting, we didn't properly put it on our website or on our Facebook page. Or as individual counselors advertising it on our pages so more people see it, right? So.
yeah, and I think we give them the final opportunity for input prior to us endorsing the budget and the 5-year plan. At least we've given the allowance for public participation, and moving forward, we may want to alter the budget process to incorporate that earlier next year, but that's something to be considered at a later date. Did I see your hand again, Mayor Day?
Yes, thank you. And thank you very much for clarifying that process. I mean, that's why I wanted to have this discussion tonight too, because the public has been invited to be involved this whole time. So there's been plenty of opportunity then. But a good idea to plan it for next year and at the appropriate time. And because I think if we advertise it as a public input session, it just would be that one more gesture to making us appear transparent into the public.
I'm sure we can add that to the council agenda prior to the budget reading of first, second, or third, or whatever. Joseph, I'm looking.
Yeah, the only thing is, I think it would be better to do it on the March 23rd, prior to it going to first, second, and third readings. That gives people an opportunity. Furthermore, on the April meeting, that we do have a public hearing at 6, so that could well impact any discussions of the budget. So I just thought maybe better to have it earlier rather than later.
Yeah, I was hoping to finalize the budget in March council meeting, but that's just me personally, but
We've always done it in April. So.
Yeah. But we could have the input in the March council meeting, do first and second reading, and then move it to third and approval in April. Question. Yes, Joseph.
Yeah, that's assuming we got all the numbers from the other local governments, like the library and I think the CBRD, I think must be here, just so that we can move forward with the 3 readings. Otherwise, we may not even be ready for March.
Yeah, okay. I think you've heard what council is considering for public input. And if it doesn't transpire this year, at least we'll have the process moving forward to incorporate that a little bit earlier for the
Happen
public.
this year.
Yeah, we've had the opportunity all the way along, so. I believe we're looking for adjournment. Councillor Bomaka, did you have a point? Or are you moving adjournment? Seconded by Councillor Austin. All those in favor? Those opposed? Well, thank you very much again, staff, for all your input and guidance through this process. Fellow councillors for your great
Patience.
input as well. Oh, no, it's not. You're the one that has to be patient with us. And again, thank you very much. Have a good night.
Good night.
Night all.